We saw that defiant parade of Conservatives. That picture was on the front page of The Australian the day after, of the Conservative arm of the Liberal Party marching into that meeting, led by three women. There they are, Sarah Henderson and just behind there, Angus Taylor and Andrew Hastie, the male competitors probably for the leadership. What do you think that says about Sussan Ley's leadership?
Well, I think that it probably is on a bit of a knife edge, but having said that, and I'm not a fan, remember, I've said that before, she's come out pretty hard since the decision was made, and it would have been a very tough decision. But what she's doing in these early hours after that party room meeting is to go out on the front foot and go hard. That's what I've been advocating. You can't make this sort of decision and be half pregnant. You've got to go out there with conviction and now argue why net zero is so bad for Australians, why it has increased the cost of living, why our quality of life has gone backwards, and why it is an impossible, crazy economic suicide note to the nation. And if they do that, well, I think that they actually can start to succeed on the matter. But don't try and straddle the barbed wire fence.
And as Saul said there, I mean, stop Canberra being the one to pick winners. Let the market decide what the grid needs to remain reliable, and talk about the things that will make it reliable, like, you know, coal-fired power stations, like a long-term ambition to have nuclear energy, like more gas being used. Prosecute that hard, because you then highlight that all Chris Bowen ever talks about, and Anthony Albanese, is that wind and solar are cheap and that's the future.
And also talk, Steve, about the fact that, and I'll say it again, I've said it on your show before, but just to reiterate, this household has spent $45,000, and we're affluent and we can afford it, $45,000 on batteries and solar, and guess what? We still get a power bill. In fact, we got a $500 power bill for the last quarter. You know, so this stuff is costing Australians a mozza. It's not cheap, it's not free. And the most ridiculous idea of Chris Bowen's in the last 2 weeks was that, you know, 3 hours of free electricity during the middle of the day. I mean, Judith Sloan in The Australian demolished that comprehensively a few days ago. And she points out that basically, yes, you get 3 hours of free power, but you pay for it in increased charges for the rest of the day, the other 21 hours of the day. And that was always a fact, just like the ill-conceived solar panel sort of incentive schemes going back about a decade ago, which then were all factored into people's power bills. People with panels got this great subsidy, and it was paid for by everyone who didn't have panels. So if the coalition go out hard and explain this to Australians, particularly on the cost of living issues, I think they'll really start to succeed.
Yeah, and once all of those power bill, government-paid power bill amounts that we're getting, me included, $75 off. Well, I can pay my own power bill. Why am I getting $75 from the taxpayer of Australia to supplement the cost of my energy? I mean, once they all go, we know exactly what that does for a start to inflation, and then people are just going to be back worse than they were when we started this whole nonsense.
It was smoke and mirrors from the beginning, Steve. It's like they take it out of this pocket and they take it around the back and then they go, "Wee, here's some money for you." I mean, and again, that's what the coalition should have been saying, that this is just smoke and mirrors. Ever since we've been on this net zero trajectory with renewables, the bills have gone up double digits, and it is an extraordinary burden on everyday Australians. And everything we use in our lives is impacted by the cost of electricity and energy.
You're a former military man. I want to ask you about Anthony Albanese and what he did on the 50th anniversary of the Whitlam dismissal. I mean, he's going to strike a statue, apparently a bronze statue of Gough Whitlam that'll be put somewhere in Canberra, presumably on the steps of the old Parliament House. He escalated the partisan rhetoric. He unveiled that statue the night before. It was a very sort of nasty speech. I would have thought that you quarantine. I know it was the 50th anniversary of Whitlam being punted, but don't you quarantine, you know, Remembrance Day and leave it for what it should be, where we have a minute's silence to remember everyone who's lost their life in the history of this country?
Yes, Steve, and I'm afraid it really reminds me of Albo's infamous comment about just wanting to fight Tories. I mean, when he does stuff like this, the veil comes down and we see a guy who's just so partisan, and he has pretended that he wants to bring Australians together. At the end of the day, he wants to prosecute these arguments, 50 years on. He's maintaining the rage, I suppose. I mean, I was 12 at the time, but I remember it vividly. I'm sure you do. They were a dud government. They caused huge inflationary pressures in Australia, wages breakouts. One thing that's been forgotten in all the commentary on this 50th anniversary is the Kemlani loan affair, where they sought to borrow money overseas, effectively illegally, unconstitutionally. I mean, all the other scandals during their short period of time in office, and then they were comprehensively tossed out by the Australian community. So he can carry on all he likes about conspiracies, blah, 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 the same recycled nonsense. But the Whitlam government was on the nose. They were thrown out. That's what I remember, and that's what actually happened. That's what we should be saying on the 50th anniversary. But for one, I don't believe there was a conspiracy. There was a deadlock. And the Governor-General of the day, who was personally vilified for years afterwards, made a tough call that had to be made.
Well, Whitlam lost 30 seats when they went to an election 4 weeks after the dismissal. He stayed on as opposition leader, and he got beaten again at the next election. So,
and he got lost,
for Anthony Albanese to say he was a great Prime Minister and we should, put a statue up to him in Canberra. Why the hell would you put a statue up to Gough Whitlam in Canberra when you look at if you look sensibly and honestly at what he did to the country, statue, give me a break.
Steve, this is the difference between the Labor Party and the Coalition. The Labor Party are relentless. They never admit that they have done the wrong thing. They never admit they've stuffed it up. They never take responsibility for the problems they create. I mean, I'll give you an example right now. Everyone continues to hail Gillard. When they talk about Gillard and the NDIS, they say how fantastic it was. The NDIS as delivered by Gillard has been an abject disaster for this country. It is a huge, huge issue for all Australians in terms of being able to pay for a scheme that's just running out of control. But everyone says, what a great job Gillard did. I was there at the time as a Premier trying to fight against her reckless implementation of it before the details were sorted out, and we're all paying for it now.
Are we ever? It's going to send the country broke. Campbell, always good to see you. I'll talk to you next week. Campbell Newman.